Let's move on. Joining us now, the ranking Republican on the Senate Homeland Security Committee, Senator Rob Portman of Ohio is here. He's the co-chair of the Senate Ukraine Caucus, and Democratic member of the Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire. She serves as the vice chair of the Senate Ukraine Caucus, and we are honored to have you both here.
It is great to have you all both here. So I'm going to ask you the same question I asked of Ambassador McFaul. You had the Biden administration saying very clearly earlier in the week, an invasion is an invasion is an invasion. Afterwards, Jen Psaki put out a White House statement that said, if they, well, here it is. If any Russian military forces move across the Ukrainian border, that's a renewed invasion. It will be met with swift, severe, and united response from the U.S. and our allies. So we have a strong statement before, we have a strong statement after, and we have the very unfortunate gaffe during the press conference where the president talks about a slight or a mild invasion, incursion. Are we in a worse position today with Russia and Putin than we were before that slip up in the press conference? Or do the statements before and after send a message to Putin?
I think it's confusing, not just to Vladimir Putin, but also to our allies, including Ukraine. Yeah. And you heard their comments. So, look, it was unfortunate. It was also unhelpful. But I thought the cleanup was pretty strong. He also made some other statements, including predicting that there will be an attack. Nobody knows that.
Why do you think he did that?
I think probably trying to prepare the American people for that possibility. But, you know, that's not what we're about right now. We're about deterrence. We're about sending clear messages about how unified we are, how there will be devastating consequences should Vladimir Putin and Russia decide to make this terrible mistake.
Could you explain how devastating the consequences could be? Because we didn't get that last night at the press conference. Yeah. But Russia, I mean, God help us if we have another dust-up with Russia. I would like us to start having more normalized relations, but
we've tried.
We have tried again and again and again, and they keep Georgia in 08, 14, now
Moldova.
Moldova. Talk about the severe consequences if Russia does go in.
Three things. Number one, devastating sanctions. The president has called them unprecedented. He has not specified them, but the thought is there would be financial sanctions that we have not previously used, and that this would be not just terrible for the Russian economy, but also for Vladimir Putin and his associates. Second is that the military in Ukraine is very different than it was in 2014, thanks in part to NATO training, thanks in part to the military weapons that are already there. And third, that should there be an invasion, that we, the United States, and other allies, including, I hope, NATO, will fortify Eastern Europe in ways we've never done before. And the president has been clear about that there will be additional troops and military assets sent to the region, so not just Ukraine having the ability to defend itself. So it will be a bloody conflict. It will be difficult. Yeah. And as you know, Russia is concerned about body bags going, back east. And they were even concerned about it with regard to Crimea, which was, a time again in 2014 when the Ukrainians were not ready and we were not ready.
Right, and they have good reason to be concerned about that if they go in 22. Yeah. Let me ask you, Senator Shaheen, about the president's, I believe, unfortunate comments regarding our allies. He said the quiet part out loud. We've been having trouble with Germany. We've been having trouble with France. They are not shoulder to shoulder with us, unfortunately, at this critical time. What do we need to do? What does the president need to do to get Germany and France in line? And I will say that, get them in line to help prevent an invasion of Ukraine.
Well, we had an opportunity to meet with the president yesterday morning, the delegation that went to Ukraine, and he was very engaged, and we talked about our allies. And clearly, we need to have a united front. That's one of the best deterrents we can have for Vladimir Putin. And so there's been a huge diplomatic effort that's been ongoing for the last several months to sort of shuttle diplomacy to make sure that our allies are as aware as we are of what the intelligence says about the threat against Ukraine. I think they are becoming more aware. Obviously, we would like to have more agreement on what kinds of sanctions would be invoked should Putin go into Russia in any form. And I think the president, when he talked to us yesterday, was very clear that we are going to do everything possible to hold Russia accountable. And that means providing assistance to Ukraine. It means working to unite our allies. And it means supporting whatever happens in Ukraine should Russia invade.
Willie.
Senator Portman, as you know, President Putin has shrugged off sanctions every time they've come his way over the years. So if we do put harsh sanctions, if the United States puts harsh sanctions on him, he may shrug them off again and continue his work in Ukraine with that invasion. So what else is on the table from where you're sitting? What more could be done? And what are the implications for people watching today, for Americans? What happens? Are there American soldiers who might be in harm's way, for example?
Well, Willie, first, when we talk about unprecedented sanctions, it would be something new. So I kind of agree with you that the Russian economy has become somewhat sanction-proof because they've been able to move assets to places, including, by the way, dollar-denominated assets to the United States, which might now be something that we can go after. So we need to be tougher about it. You've heard discussion of the so-called SWIFT sanctions, which has to do with electronic transfers on the financial services side. So there's some things we could do we've never done before, but having our allies with us is critical because unilateral sanctions are not as effective. So that's one. But second, look, we need to have unity among our allies, and that includes, again, providing additional military assistance so Ukraine can defend itself. That should be happening, in my view, much more quickly than it is.
What more do our allies need to do? What do we need from Germany that we're not getting right now?
Let's talk about Germany, Joe, because it's a great question, and I'm very disappointed, frankly. Three things we need from them right now. One is the ability for other NATO countries to transfer arms to Ukraine. They are actually blocking transfer of arms that other NATO members would like to send.
Why?
Because under NATO agreements and the NATO procurement system, they are permitted to do that.
No, but I'm asking, though, why would Germany stand in the way? Is it all energy?
I would ask you to ask them, but I suppose they think that it's provocative. But 100,000 troops being amassed on your border and more equipment, troops coming up every day is pretty darn provocative.
Yes, it is.
So, I mean, I'm not sure how they'd be further provoked if they're provoked by a peaceful nation like Ukraine just saying, please respect our territorial integrity. Second, there is discussion about whether they're allowing overflights. As you know, the British cargo that we saw on the
tarmac,
on the tarmac, a C-17 with anti-tank weapons. Apparently, they had to go around German airspace, which was reported, including on your network, because Germany wouldn't permit it. Now, there's some that say that isn't true, but if you go online, you can see where the transponder on the plane was and where they went. And they went around Germany. That's outrageous.
That is outrageous.
Yes.
And then third, of course, is with regard to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which is an issue where Republicans and Democrats have tended to differ. But I think everyone should agree that should there be an incursion, an invasion, any kind of activity, that the pipeline needs to be cut off.
It's got to be cut off.
That has to be something.
Do you agree?
And Germany has not said that would happen.
I do. I was actually a co-sponsor with Ted Cruz of the original sanctions bill against Nord Stream 2. But the difference that we have is that right now, the most important thing, I believe, is to try and present that united front. And so we don't want to take away the threat of sanctions on Nord Stream 2 against Putin, and we want to stand with our allies. So I think there's no doubt that there is strong bipartisan opposition to the long-term operation of Nord Stream 2. It's not in the interest of the energy security of Europe or Germany.
Katty Kay.
And actually, Senator Shaheen, I mean, there is now the new German foreign minister is a member of the Green Party and has been saying kinds of things that may leave us room for negotiation over Nord Stream 2 and energy. She seems less wedded to the old policy of protecting that. I wanted just to point you, there's a very interesting essay has just come out from the UK defence minister, and at the end of it he says, basically, if Russia moves into Ukraine, we have to think, what does that mean, not just for Ukraine, but for all of us in Europe, what it means the next time. Could you just, if Russia were to move into Ukraine, as President Biden said last night, as the British defence minister seems to fear he might do, what does that mean for the world? Are we looking at World War III? Paint the picture for us, if you can, of why Americans should sit up and take notice if this happens.
Well, this is the potential for the biggest conflict in Europe since World War II. And the question is if Putin has not stopped here, we saw what he did in Georgia in 2008, what he's tried to do in Moldova, what he's doing in the Balkans to try and create disruption there. We are hearing from our Eastern European allies, Poland, the Baltics, about their concerns, and there is no guarantee on where he's going to stop. And we can't allow Vladimir Putin and Russia to decide for a sovereign country what their future is going to be. That's in the interest of every country in the transatlantic alliance. So I think this is a real watershed moment. And one of the things we heard from the Ukrainians when we were there is that they are ready to fight. This is not the same Ukraine that Putin went into in 2014 when he seized Crimea, where there were a lot of people who were very supportive of Russia, who were ambivalent about their future. This is a Ukraine that has a Ukrainian identity. And we need to make clear, and they need to make clear, and I think they are, to Putin, that they are ready to fight for their country.
Senator, I want to change subjects briefly. The debate goes... Oh, I'm sorry.
Can I just mention something in response to what Katie said? I think this is global. I mean, I think this is not just about the stability of Europe, which obviously it is. And if you talk to countries like the Baltics, Poland, and others, of course, they're scared to death by this. But this is about the fight for freedom, really. And it's about us saying, as Americans and as our allies around the world, not just NATO allies, but the free world in general, that we're not going to permit this sort of thing. Otherwise, what happens with regard to places like Taiwan? What happens with regard to places in, let's say, Latin America, even, where we have countries now that, are threatening other countries that are democracies? Let's say that we do allow this to happen. What does it say, both to those countries that would feel threatened and those aggressors? And so I think this is a bigger issue, although I agree entirely with what Senator Shaheen said about the fact that this does affect Europe in a substantial way.
And NATO.
And NATO, let's finish changing topics quickly. About BBB, when you left the White House, I believe you had left the White House, saw you say something about how there were some provisions in there which would actually be anti-inflationary, that raised some eyebrows on the right. What are you talking about specifically?
I was talking about the infrastructure bill that has already been passed.
You're talking about the infrastructure bill.
Yeah, and I strongly believe that because the economic analysis shows it. These are long-term capital investments that will come back to make the economy more efficient, therefore more productive, therefore counter-inflationary.
What about BBB? Inflationary concerns? Parts of, let's say, for pre-K, if that were passed?
Well, it's all about stimulus. You know, what happens if you put more stimulus in the economy at a time when we already have supply issues, you're going to cause more inflation. I mean, this is what Larry Summers said early on, and others, Democrat and Republican, and that's clearly what happened. The $1.9 trillion was mostly stimulus. A lot of BBB is stimulus. So we need to back off on the stimulus and get our supply chain in order, which was in part due to COVID, not anything, that the administration did.
Right.
But they did push the stimulus side, which created this incredible inflation we have right now that's affecting everybody.
And Senator Shaheen, talk on the Hill, Democrats talking about splitting up BBB and maybe passing it piecemeal in ways that you could get 10 Republican votes. Is that a good strategy for Democrats moving forward?
Well, I think the important thing is to try and get some of these investments done in ways that are going to be important to the country. Early childhood education is one of those. And the Build Back Better bill has all of those programs paid for. So the stimulus piece, I think, is important, but the investment piece, making some changes that will better make our tax code fairer are really important in the long term.
And finally, Senator Portman, the Cleveland Plain Dealer had an editorial that said, "Baby, please don't go."
Yeah, they
Something
can't
along
quit
those
you.
lines. They cannot quit you.
They want you to reconsider
Will you reconsider your retirement?
They were not nearly as nice to me when they didn't think I was.
Isn't that funny? Yeah.
No, I appreciate it. But
You don't know what you got till it's
I
gone.
made my decision. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to see you both.
It's good to see you,
Thank you
too.
for coming in, both of you.
Thank you all so much.
Senator Portman and Senator Shaheen, thank you both. And still ahead on